this right away. This is just a little bit of who I am. This is my disclosure sheet of all the people that I work for. And most recently, I've been at Eastern Illinois University, but I've worked for a variety of other companies. This is my speaker credential. This is my ID from 1974 when I had hair. And then I became a grad student. I show this to my students and they laugh and they go, "You're joking, right?" And I said, "No, this is what I looked like." And I thought it looked pretty good. I'm the one on the left. And then I became a nutritionist. So today, these are the things we're going to look at. It has been the focus of what I've been doing for the last year or so. And when I tell people eat a healthy diet, people say, "Well, what's that?" You know, everybody disagrees. We've got doctors saying this and this and this, and how do I know? And so I started looking at that and I found that there's certain things that everybody agrees on. Wow, why don't we just focus on those? And then when I looked at the scripture, it's saying the same kind of thing about what we should eat. So I put this talk together about where this nutrition science and the Bible agree. And then the second point is fasting. They both agree on that too. The scripture has shown why to fast for 4,000 years. And recently, the science has been able to back that up, showing why that's a good idea. So let's just jump into this. When you look at people out there in the news, you've got some over here that's saying it's low fat, that's what's going to save you. And other people go, no, 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 it's high fat. And then you've got this other group that say, no, it's plant-based that's going to save you. You've got to eat vegan. And then you have this other group saying, no, no, it's animal-based. It's paleo. And then of all things, you have the two main nutritionists out there pick different quadrants. You've got Ornish down here that says low fat and vegan, that's what saves you. And then you've got Atkins up here and goes, no, 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 it's animal-based and it's high fat that's what saves you. Have you been discouraged by this conflicting information out there about diets? It's like, here's the really conflicting part. They both show that they work, and they both do work. And so I started thinking, wait a minute, they work compared to what? So I started looking at this. Ornish says animal products are a problem, eat plants. And then Atkins says, no, animal products are the answer. Carbs are the problem. And then you've got both claim to be healthy and reduce disease, and they do. And what I found was there must be something that's the same in all of these. But how can it be? Eat animals and fat, eat carbs, and no animals. How can there be things that they agree on? But they do. They agree on a lot of things, which we're going to talk about today. Here's the number one thing they all agree on. The SAD diet, the standard American diet, it's not good for us. Now, what makes up the SAD diet? We'll talk about that in a minute. 55% of our diet is highly processed. 55%. I'll walk the beach at South Padre Island and I'll see hundreds and thousands of people. And they're all eating chips and cookies and crackers and pretzels and processed meats and drinking soda. They spend all day and never eat a real food. All day. Now, the thing is, we all do that and we don't realize it. Did you realize? I mean, I thought about that. 55%. We'll explain what a highly processed food is in just a minute. And so they all agree. Eat less sugar and refined foods. Eat more green leafies. Eat the right portion. What if that's the thing? What if it doesn't matter how much fat you eat? What if it doesn't matter whether you eat animals or don't eat animals? What if those are not the important things? And so they all agree on these, and we're going to dive into those right now. Here is the SAD diet. It's 55% highly processed. And then it's 30% grains, 11% vegetables, and 4% whole grains. This is the definition. Ultra-processed foods, 57% of our intake is ultra-processed, and it means they have flavors, colors, sweeteners, emulsifiers, and additives. They use to increase the sensory qualities of it. They make it greasy, and fatty, and salty. And, and then they use these to disguise the other qualities of the final product. So, and it's not those necessarily that make it bad. It's the fact that when you do that, generally you take out the nutrients, you take out the fiber, and those are the things that make us healthy. Here's something about cardiovascular disease. I must apologize to all of you for lying to you in the 70s and the 80s. And my wife says, you didn't lie, you just were wrong. Okay, I was wrong. You know, I was wrong because we said, everybody was saying, eat less fat, eat less saturated fat, eat less cholesterol. Well, I've got a whole talk on that I can't talk about today, but those were wrong. Fat's not bad. Cholesterol in your diet isn't bad for almost everybody, and saturated fat could be bad for somebody, maybe. I just can't find out where. So what's been the problem all along? Added sugar. So added sugar and cardiovascular disease, this came out in 2014. And this shows that by quintiles, the lowest consumers of sugar, higher, the highest consumers of added sugar. This is not the sugar in the apple. This is the sugar that's added. This just shows that you're 2.5 times more likely to have cardiovascular disease if you eat a lot of added sugar. And then, if that weren't bad enough, when you have added sugar at 5, 10, 15, 20, 35%, the amount of nutrients goes down. Potassium is an important one. It's one of the 4 main nutrients of concern in the United States. And as you add sugar, you lose potassium. And so if you have high blood pressure, this is a problem, because it's not so much how much sodium you have in your diet, but how much potassium. Because if you have enough potassium, the sodium you eat isn't as important. Still important, but not as important. And we can talk, if you have questions about that, we can talk about it. This is something interesting. Here's John Yudkin suggested that sugar may be the main cause of heart disease. And he says national levels of fat are similar to sugar. Statistics relating fat to heart disease may express only an indirect relationship, and the actual cause is sugar. See his book here, Pure, White, and Deadly? You know when he wrote this? 1964. 1964. That's 60 years ago he wrote this, and he was right. When he wrote it, I think he was the head of the nutrition department at Queen's College in London. And so he was a very prominent man. But when he said this, his career was over. Now, here's the interesting thing. I read a study back when I was young, in the 70s, 80s. And it had this, study said, you know, it looks like sugar causes heart disease, cancer, obesity, diabetes. And I thought, wow, that's the answer. And then the author said, no. This study didn't have the right population. This study used the wrong analysis. This study didn't have the right techniques. We really don't know. And I thought, isn't that odd? They show how bad sugar is, and then they tear it apart, showing it really doesn't say that. And it was a group from Harvard. And I wondered why. This is 2016 when they said, industry-sponsored research between Harvard and the US government in the 60s and 70s successfully cast doubt on the hazards of sucrose, and they promoted fat. And so here it is 50 years later. They do a study and find out, wait a minute, Harvard was colluding with the government, and that's one reason we got this message backwards. All right, so this is just very recent, and they're urging that the dietary guidelines shift away from fat. Eat fat, don't eat fat. That doesn't seem to be the answer. There's other things we'll talk about here now. The World Health Organization says reduce your fat to less than 10%, or reduce your added sugar. They say free sugars, the same thing as added sugars, to 10%. Better to go to 5. Nobody says don't eat any. If you love Snickers bars, then eat a Snickers bar. Don't eat them every day. Don't deny yourself a Snickers bar. Look forward to eating it. Have it once a month. Well, then I would die. I can't do that. Okay, have it once a week. I still might die. Okay, have it every other day. I mean, somehow cut down the amount you're having and plan ahead to eat it and really enjoy it. but don't try and get rid of it. All right, that was idea number one. Number two, and this could be the most important thing, eat green leafy vegetables. This is not a new idea. Genesis 1:29, written 4,000 years ago, I don't know. I give this to all my medical lectures, and I tell these people, I think this is God's plan for us. But if you don't, it doesn't matter. This is really, really old. It has been around for 4,000 years. And God said, behold, I've given every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which there's fruit, yielding seed, it shall be food for you. This is really amazing. What if, to be healthy, just stay away from the highly refined things and eat green leafy plants? Have you ever seen a cow? Have you ever seen a bull that weighs 2,000 pounds? Do you know what it ate to gain those 2,000 pounds? Grass. It doesn't eat meat. It eats it, and we eat it for meat, but it doesn't eat meat. All that massive amount of muscle comes from eating green plants. Now, here's the most fascinating thing. This has got God written all over it. I want you to take your bathing suit, put it on, and go out and lay in the sun all day today for 12 hours. What's going to happen to you? You will be burnt to a crisp. Do it for 3 days and you'll be dead. Why? Because our body can't absorb that energy. It just cooks us. Now, what's the interesting thing is God made these green plants here. They can. They have something called chlorophyll. The sun hits the chlorophyll, and this is the amazing God event that happens. This chlorophyll, it takes carbon dioxide out of the air, and it takes water out of the ground, and it takes carbon dioxide and water and hooks them together as a carbohydrate. Wow, that makes sugar. It makes starch. It's the basis for proteins. It gets converted into fats. All of the energy that we need in life comes from this big ball up here, the sun. Can you see why people worship the sun? It gives everything we need. Just to digress a moment, the glucose that's created, it's a sugar, it becomes a starch. If you hook it together this way, it's a starch. If you hook it together this way, it becomes a fiber. It's the fiber in our clothes. It's the fiber in the wood walls in our house, in the chairs that we sit in. It's the fiber that's in the wood that you break down when you burn it to get heat. So energy from the sun gets locked into these green plants. It keeps us warm, it covers us, it shelters us, and it provides us food. I can see why people worship the sun. But the interesting thing is, God says in Romans 1:17, the invisible things of God, his eternal power and divine nature, doesn't show the plan of salvation in nature. His eternal power, his divine nature are clearly seen by what he has made. This is amazing. The sun is an example of the SON that provides everything we need. It's phenomenal to me. All right, so these green plants, they provide all the energy we need. Here's the fascinating thing. You take those green plants, you bury them for thousands of years, and everything gets taken out but the carbon chains, and you burn them in gasoline, they explode. I mean, you light a match over gasoline, it explodes. When you eat a potato, you don't explode. Why? Because this carbohydrate is broken down one little piece at a time, taking energy out of it as it goes along until it gives us enough energy for us to be able to live. Here's just one example. Spinach is wonderful. Think of what spinach did for Popeye. I mean, he's this skinny little guy, and he takes the spinach and he's bulging. Okay, fine. Here's 1 cup of spinach, 1 ounce of spinach. It's only 0.4% of the calories we need all day. What does it give us? 181% of K, 56% of A, folate 15, vitamin C 14. It gives us lutein to keep our eyes healthy, magnesium and iron. And what you have is 0.4% of the calories, 0.4%. and it's giving you 100% of many nutrients. That's amazing. Green leafy vegetables do amazing these. And then this is just talking about fruits and vegetables are associated with lower heart disease, lower stroke, all kinds of things. These are the colors: beta carotene, alpha carotene, lutein. These are the colors in those green plants. Now, this is an orange color that's kind of buried in there. When the trees turn color in the fall, sometimes these other colors come out. But you can see them in carrots and tomatoes and things like that. As you go from the lowest consumption to the moderate consumption to the high consumption, you can see that cancer rates just drop by 50% between high consumers, between no consumers and high consumers. It just drops. Green plants do this and do many, many things. So that's just green leafy plants. A couple of other ideas on what we can focus on eating. Everybody agrees, eat onions and garlic and leeks. The only problem with onions is that they cause social problems. You eat it and your friends don't, and they get upset. My wife does this all the time. She says, "You stink." What? She says, "Breathe the other way." Why? You smell like garlic. Well, then I say, eat some garlic, and then I won't smell so bad. So these compounds are just incredible in what they do for us. For 4,000 years, we've known in folk medicine that garlic does amazing things. When I find out something's good for me, sometimes my wife says I overdo it. I found out garlic was good for me, and I found out that it reduced all these other kinds of things: bacteria, fungus, mold. It's very effective against all of them. In the war, in World War II, before antibiotics, they would take garlic and put it in wounds to keep them from getting infected. And so I found out it was good for me, and I was in the garden, and I scratched my back right under my belt, and I got some funny kind of a thing going there, some kind of a oozing, whatever it was. I don't know what it was. I didn't go to the doctor, but I thought, garlic. So I took garlic, I smashed it up, I put it on this huge Band-Aid, and I stuck it on my back. And I left it there for 24 hours. And then I read, don't put garlic on your skin, it will burn. Well, whatever was there, it killed it within 24 hours. But I had this huge burn on my back for 3 months, so be careful. But it's great to eat. And I did this thing with warts. I had warts on my foot forever. And the doctor would put my foot in formaldehyde. And I said, isn't that what they pickle dead things with? And so it would kill the bottom of my foot, but the wart stayed. So I took some of this garlic, I put it on a Band-Aid, I stuck it on the wart, and within 3 days, the wart was gone. And so there's all kinds of good data on this, and it's antimicrobial, antiviral. On my webpage, I put some things up about what we can do, what we can eat that are effective against viruses. And the coronavirus is as deadly as it looks like it is a little cell. It's not even a cell. It's a little piece of plasma that's surrounded by this lipid ring, and it has some DNA in it. And it really is pretty. If you put it out in the sun, it's gone in a minute and a half. If you heat it up too much, it dissolves. And garlic's antiviral. It tends to work against these things too. Now, if you don't chop it, you don't get anything, because those compounds are not there until the skin is broken. And so you have to chop it, cut it, peel it. If you smell a bulb of garlic, it smells like nothing. You can't tell until you cut it. It's a defense mechanism. If something bites the plant, these things are created, and that bug goes, this stinks, and it takes off. And so it's a defense mechanism for the plant. And so you have to cut it, chop it, whatever. And once you've done that, it's good. You've got those good compounds that are in there. And then this is just a little test on prostate cancer cell lines. If you have a prostate or love someone who does, this is for you. And again, it shows that as you add, this is 24 hours and 48 hours, and this is uptake. As you add more of the diallyl sulfide, that's one of the main compounds in garlic, it reduces prostate cancer cell lines. This is done in a test tube. How much garlic to eat? You just need 1 to 3 cloves. You don't need a lot. And so I wondered, can you get this? I mean, sometimes things are good for you, but you can't eat enough to get that efficacious dose. And so I thought, oh, let me test this with students. So I took a cup of tomato sauce and I gave it to the students with the spaghetti. They liked it. I put a clove of garlic in per cup, and they ate it and thought, this is pretty good. I don't know why. And then I put 3 cloves in, and they thought, oh, that's garlic. This is really good. So I thought, why not? I'll put 20 cloves in there. So I put 20 cloves per cup of sauce. I fed it to the students and they go, hot, it's hot. Okay, that's too much garlic. But you don't need that much. You just need 1 to 3 cloves a day to get all kinds of amazing effects. There's a doc by all of you up there. His name is Keith Nemec, and he's in Wheaton. And he has this, this place where he brings people and he puts them on a raw vegan diet. And one of the things he does is give people garlic. He has amazing testimonies of people that have been cured from the most horrible conditions by just eating lots of whole plant foods. Garlic's one of them. He thinks it's the most important one. Just quickly here about herbs and spices. This is rosemary. It contains amazing antioxidants. This is a study that was done by a friend of mine here at the University of Illinois. They gave these little mice a cancer-causing agent, and in 15 weeks, they all had tumors. They added 1.2 milligrams of rosemary, and it cut it in half. They added 3.6. It didn't even get started. So rosemary was potent enough to prevent the oxidative damage that was beginning the tumors, and it didn't even get started. The only other one I want to talk about is turmeric, and there's so many things we could talk about. This is just 2. They're not the best. They're 2 that I think are good. And turmeric is part of curry. So curry is 28% turmeric. All right. And in turmeric, then, there's these compounds called curcuminoids or curcumin. And these are the things that are medically beneficial. And this is a lung cancer study. And what this shows is, again, they gave these little mice a cancer-causing agent, and they almost all got it. And they gave them Taxol, and it cut it down by 25%. Taxol is a very common drug used for cancer. I'm not a medical doctor, so I never even use it. I don't know anything about it. But then they gave them curcumin, and it worked better than the Taxol. And when you put them together, it worked even better. And so there are so many things out there. If we would just eat whole plant foods, that we would be much better off for it. All right, then the last part of this first section is eat the right portion. Let me just go back to one thing. People ask me, how long have you studied nutrition? 40 years. And what do you say to people? Eat whole foods. That's it, Doc? That's all you got? That's all I got. I mean, there's lots of specifics behind it, but generally, eat whole foods. And when you eat those whole foods, the design where God has between us and whole foods like this is amazing. Okay, eat the right portion then. Nutrition scientists agree to reduce it. Proverbs says, put a knife to your throat if thou be given to an appetite. For the drunkard, the glutton shall come to poverty. Drowsiness shall clothe a man to rags. Okay, so there's a number of things in the scripture about don't eat too much. We can eat. Now, this next part, when I get into fasting, is one of the ways that can help us do this. But basically, there's some things we can do just in the natural to help ourselves eat less. And we did this video called Portion Size Me 10 years ago. And so I looked at Super Size Me. You've seen Super Size Me, I think. And I had seen Super Size Me flying back on a plane from Europe back in 2005. And he said that you just need to stop eating fast food. And I thought, that's silly. I'm there with my wife having a salad at Subway. It's all spinach, 5 vegetables. It has tuna on it. I'm eating it thinking, this is the healthiest thing I can eat. It's not fast food that's bad. It's bad fast food that's bad. There are some fast foods you can eat that are very good. And I said, it's the right portion. And I said to my wife, you know what I'm going to do, babe? I am going to film you eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And we're going to eat out all the time. And you're going to make healthy choices. And we're going to show that you can do it. Eat out and eat fast food and be healthy. And so what did she say? She said, I'm so tired of you turning everything we do into an experiment. Can't we be like normal people? And I said, no, we're not normal. And she said, why don't you get some students? And I said, yes, we'll get a couple of students. And so these are 2 students in my graduate program at Eastern Illinois University. This is Aaron and Ellen. And so we fed them fast food for 30 days to see what would happen to them in 30 days. Now, we'll see what happens with this video. I hope it works. Let's give it a try.
We continue our special series this morning with a look at ourselves. To put it quite simply, we are a nation of overeaters. But the good news is there's some simple things that all of us can do about it, and early show consumer correspondent Susan Koopman has details. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning, Hannah. Believe it or not, you can eat fast food, chocolate, candy, and cookies and still shed pounds. You're about to meet a professor who says it all comes down to something very simple: portion control.
Pizza, burgers, fries. We think they're the enemy in the battle of the bulge, but maybe not.
Yes, you can eat all those things and lose weight.
Is that coming across okay?
It came across okay.
All right, now, if it's choppy and you want to go back, it's on my website. You can just look through it again. If it doesn't all come through, I'll talk about a couple more things just for a minute. And then if you want to go back and watch it, you can just click on it and watch it. But it's interesting. I went to New York City and they interviewed me for 5 hours. The one thing they pulled out is, yeah, you can eat whatever you want. And I thought, are you joking? That's what you're going to pull out of this thing? But they bring a couple of good points here in just a second, and I want to show you these.
Nutrition expert Jim Painter says it's not so much what you eat, but how much you eat. He proves it in his documentary, Portion Size Made, where he puts 2 of his
Watch Aaron
on a
here.
30-day
He's a
fast
machine
diet.
when he eats.
Both ended up losing a couple of pounds. Their blood cholesterol levels dropped. Their blood lipid stayed normal. Their liver enzymes stayed normal. Everything was fine if they ate the right portion.
And this was eating fast food every day.
Lunch and dinner, and they end up losing weight.
But getting the right portion size is getting harder. Painter showed us how portions have ballooned. This is a Caesar salad from 20 years ago versus today. Double the portion, double the calories. And same with the pasta and the meatballs.
Same with the pasta and meatballs. Now, if you just say, give me the regular serving, it's going to be almost twice as much.
And just look at a regular burger and fries from the 50s compared to now. But don't you think people want this? They don't want that.
They really do. And so one of the problems is that we have this idea that more is better. And if you look at people's waistlines, they are more now. And it's not better.
But is it possible to eat smaller portions and still be satisfied? Painter says yes. And to prove his point, he helped us set up an experiment. We invited this group of people to take part in an all-you-can-eat ice cream taste test.
Take as much as you want. If you want to come back for seconds, you should come back for seconds.
We started by splitting them into 2 separate groups. Group A was given a big scoop, big bowls, and big spoons. Group B was given a scoop, bowls, and spoons about half the size. As a result, Group A took huge portions and piled on the toppings. Once we weighed each bowl, they chowed down. Everyone in this group ate quickly. Most even came back for seconds. But watch what happened when we brought in Group B, the ones with the smaller bowls. They filled their dishes, but with smaller spoons, it took them more time to get to the bottom, and most quit after.
Oh, I don't know what I did there. Somehow I missed it. Okay, here we are. Look at this guy. Look at how he's holding the spoon like this. The spoon is only this big. Does he look familiar to you? This is 2006, and I was in New York City. I went to an acting studio to get people to come in and sit here for this test. And I'm pretty sure he's the guy on the blind side. You know, I've never called him up to check to make sure he was the guy, but man, it sure looks like him. So he's eating his bowl. And when he finishes, I say, do you want more? And he goes, no, I'm really fine. I said, are you sure? Really fine. Yeah, really? He goes, yeah, I'm fine. And then I brought the bowls out, and he saw that he had a small bowl and other people had a big bowl. And then he turned to me and said, you cheated me, Dr. Painter. You cheated me. I said, no, I didn't. I asked you. He said, I want more now. Well, why was he satisfied before he saw that he had a tiny bowl? Because he finished the bowl and he was done. This young lady explains it, and I'll play a little piece of it here.
After only 1 serving, does everybody feel like they ate enough ice cream? Yeah. Yes. Then we revealed the truth of our experiment and the result. Even though both groups told us they were completely satisfied, Group A, the one with the bigger bowls and spoons, ate twice as much as Group B. Are you surprised that you guys ate double what they ate?
Absolutely. And I can definitely see how just the size of the bowls did it.
This
Why
next
do you
girl
think
explains
you're
it really
less?
well.
I guess because when you see that your bowl's full and then you eat everything in there, you feel like I had enough and that's all I need.
Jim Painter says the lesson is simple. Control your weight by controlling your portion size. What is
Now, this is my research for 40 years or 30 years, and I can't talk about all of it, but if we want to eat less, first thing we do is have smaller plates, bowls, glasses, cups. When you're eating out of something smaller, you just eat less. And we've done this study numerous times. It turns out the same. A couple of other things about this, because we don't have time to say it. But before I finish up with fasting, keep food out of sight. And if you go to my website, there's a number of things. It's drjimpainter.com. And there's a variety of videos up there about these different ways of eating less. But number one, smaller everything. Number two, keep things out of sight. We're on a seafood diet. We see it, we eat it. So if you want to eat less, hide it, keep it out of the house, don't have it there, you won't eat it. So that's number two. And there's a lot of other principles on who you eat with, how you eat, when you're in restaurants, what you can do. But that's number one principle. Okay, let's finish up today with fasting. And we have just a few minutes left here. So interesting enough, the New Testament says almost nothing about fasting. Almost nothing. I mean, Jesus mentions it, and what he says is, when you fast, do not look gloomy. He doesn't tell people to fast. He doesn't teach people about fasting. Why? Because at the time, everybody was fasting. It was a normal part of the Jewish tradition. And so he just said, don't be a hypocrite. Don't go, I'm fasting, I feel so bad, and I'm suffering for God. And he said, don't do that, but do fast. And so he says, fast. And then Luke, they come to him and say, Jesus, why don't your disciples fast? He said, they will. They're not fasting because I'm here. But when I'm gone, they will fast. And then you look at Paul, and when do we fast? When we're in trouble. So here's Paul. He's on a ship. They've been going for 14 days, tossed around. Think of how you feel one day being seasick. What about 10 days? What about 2 weeks? These people they hadn't eaten 14 days. And Paul says, we're going to wreck this ship in a minute. Everybody eat. And so we fast when we're in desperate need. We fast. But there's a couple of reasons in the New Testament to keep your body under. Our old man comes up and wants to do things. When we tell our body no in one area, it helps in all the other areas. You have trouble with spending money, with sexual desires and thoughts, with not being nice to people, with being too unloving, with concentrating on yourself. When we fast and discipline our body and say, no, you don't get to eat. Doesn't matter how long it is, just a little bit of that. No, that helps every area of our life. So in the New Testament, it does talk about bodily discipline. And so fasting is one thing that helps us in that. You have to go back to the Old Testament to see much about this. And then Isaiah 58, is it a fast that I have chosen a day to humble oneself? So humbling ourselves is part of it. Is not the fast I've chosen to loose the bonds of wickedness. If we're stuck in situations where we need to really get God's perspective on things, it doesn't get his attention. Fasting doesn't change God, it changes us. And so if we need to, in a desperate situation, focus on him, fasting helps us do that because we've told our body no. And so there's spiritual reasons to fast. And repentance, yet now declares the Lord, return to me with your whole heart with fasting. So repentance is a time when we would want to fast. And but when they were sick, I wore sackcloth, I afflicted myself with fasting. I prayed with my head bowed to my chest. And so repentance, fasting for sickness, if we want to get God's mind on something, fasting's a great idea. You know what's lovely about the Orthodox Church? We were in Hawaii a couple years ago. We went to an Orthodox church out there. First time I'd ever been there. They do things like we did 1,000 years ago because there were 5 bishops apparently. And then when the Catholics took off and there was only 4, they only changed things when all 5 bishops agree, and there's only 4 left. And so they haven't changed anything since like 1,000 years ago. You look at the Orthodox Church, and they do a lot of fasting. It's phenomenal. and it's very healthy. If you look at some of the Christian traditions that do, like the Seventh-day Adventists, they do. Loma Linda, it's one of the blue zones. They fast a lot. They're very healthy. And then, you know, the Mormons, they fast a lot. They're fairly healthy too. But in the Christian tradition, you can look at the Seventh-day Adventists and see what a benefit it is. All right. Now I've just got a few minutes. I'm going to have to run through these things fast. This is kind of the different kinds of fasting. There's complete alternate day fasting, modified fasting, time restricted, which is the one I'm going to talk about the most, shrink the amount of time that you eat. There's all kinds of religious fasting we won't have time to talk about today. But fasting does all these things. It reduces insulin if you're diabetic, helps your immune system if you want to be healthier, helps prevent cancer, regulates cell metabolism, promotes weight loss. All of these things are benefits of fasting, and I'm just going to talk about a few. This is one of the early studies that just showed it. You fed a little mouse as much as it could eat, and they were all dead in about 45 months. And half of them died at about 25. You fed them less, fed them less, fed them less. And then you look at this group, half of them had died at 55 months, and here half of them died at 25 months. It almost doubled their lifespan. Now, the sad thing is we are not mice, and it works amazingly well for mice. It does work for us, but not quite this good. If you fast, you're not going to live to be 200. All right, a couple of benefits then. Neurologically, it's great for our whole nervous system. And when you fast, it decreases glucose, insulin, and some of these pro-inflammatory markers. When you fast, it increases, this is what I'm going to talk about, beta-hydroxybutyrate. It increases brain-derived neurotropic factor. When I was a kid, they told me, drink that alcohol and wipe out those brain cells. You're dead, buddy, because you're never going to get them again. We were wrong. You do grow brain cells. We call that neuroplasticity, where our brain is able to grow more cells. But these are all the benefits of it. Now, this is a study I just found. It's not even a year old, and I've never given this in a talk before. And I'm going to explain this. This is going to take 4 or 5 minutes, and it's a little complicated, but walk through this with me, and I want to show you something about fasting. Now, what we have here, this is a cell. So here's a brain. This is a brain cell. You know, it's just a picture of a brain cell. Over here is liver. This is one liver cell. And then this thing in the middle is the mitochondria. Now, this is way out of proportion. In this one cell would be hundreds of mitochondria that might be in there. And then same thing with the liver. This is one mitochondria. A mitochondria is the place where energy is created in a cell. And then this is just a blood vessel running between the two. This is a portal vein. This is actually the blood vessel that goes from the intestines to the liver. But that's what this picture is. This is brain cell, this is liver cell, this is the circulation between them. Now, number one, when we fast, what happens? We don't take in any food, and we don't have any sugar, and we don't have any carbohydrates. So after 24 hours or so, all of a sudden, the fatty acids start going up because our body's breaking down fat. And those fatty acids go into the liver. And this little enzyme, CPT, is the regulator. If there's a lot of sugar and carbohydrates around, this thing doesn't work very well. And so you burn sugar. If you don't have sugar and carbohydrate, this enzyme kicks up and it starts burning fats. So you start taking these fats, and this acyl-CoA, acyl is any kind of a fat, joint coenzyme A. And then it breaks down one at a time, and it creates acetyl-CoA. This is CoA is an enzyme that has one little group of 2 carbons on it, and it's the main energy transfer in our body. If you eat glucose, it ends up at acetyl-CoA. If you eat fat, it ends up at acetyl-CoA. If you burn proteins, many of them end up as acetyl-CoA. So it's a central molecule. Now, generally, this acetyl-CoA goes right into what is called the tricarboxylic acid cycle, and that burns it up for energy. But if you put too much in there, it can't burn it up fast enough. And so all of a sudden, all the CoA is bound up, and we need it. So what your body does, it takes 2 of those acetyl-CoAs and puts them together. And now it's a 4-carbon molecule, and you have acetoacetate-CoA. And then it breaks off the CoA so it can use it again and keep this process going, and it makes acetoacetate, which is Have you ever heard of people saying, I want to have ketosis or ketone bodies on my, you smell it sweet on the breath. When a baby doesn't eat for 6 hours, all of a sudden this happens because baby's body's only this big. And you smell that sweet acetone. It's like nail polish remover. You smell it on their breath right away. Well, big people like us, it takes longer for that to happen. But what happens is that these things, this little 4-carbon molecule that's created is called a ketone body. It can be in the form of acetoacetate or beta-hydroxybutyrate. Now, what's interesting is God's design's so amazing. Your liver makes these, but it can't use them to burn for energy. Your muscles can, your brain can. And so all of a sudden, this is building up in your liver, and it just spews it out into your blood system. Within hours, then, all of a sudden, your body is making these ketone bodies. These ketone bodies go right across the blood system, right across into the brain. Your brain takes them and burns them for energy. So one of the things fasting does is all of a sudden it switches. It switches what we're burning for fuel from glucose and carbohydrates to fats. And when you burn fats, you make these amazing ketone bodies that go to your brain. And I notice when I have a talk to give, I never eat before my talk. And my brain gets better and better. Think about it over the last 10,000 years. If you're hunting for things and you haven't eaten for 2 days, or a lion's hunting for things and it hasn't eaten for 2 days, its brain has to work even better to find that food. And so what happens is these ketone bodies, we burn them for energy and our brain picks up. This whole talk will go back to this. Remember, this was neuroketone therapeutics for Alzheimer's. And so I don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but when you fast, these ketone bodies are created and your brain burns them for energy. That's point number one. I'm going to go to a ketogenic diet. If you stop eating carbohydrates and then you just eat a bunch of protein and fat, you run out of carbohydrates. And once again, this enzyme kicks up and you start burning fatty acids so fast that you make ketones. So that's why you call a ketogenic diet. If you don't eat any carbs, lots of fat, get ketones. My last point on this today, and this is the most amazing thing about this article, you can actually eat medium chain triglycerides. Now these long fats, the normal fats are 10, 12, 16, 18 carbons long. MCT oil is 6, 8, and 10. The fantastic thing about these little fats, you find them in coconut oil, is that they don't require this transporter. So when you eat fat and your portal vein takes that medium chain triglyceride, sends it to the liver, all of a sudden your liver gets overwhelmed with MCT oil. The MCT oil goes right in, it starts breaking down, it's breaking down too fast, and your body makes these ketones. You can create ketones by eating MCT oil. And no matter how much carbohydrates you're eating, you eat these MCT oils and they go into your liver, and your liver makes ketones and they go to your brain. Now, I don't have time to show you this, but there's studies out there looking at older adults like us, 88%, all of a sudden we start getting confused. We're not getting enough energy in our brain. And if you eat MCT oil, if you fast, if you go on a ketogenic diet, you produce more of these ketones. Those ketones go right into your brain, and all of a sudden your brain starts functioning better. So I heard that question. So coconut oil is where we get MCT oil. So MCT oil then, even if you're eating carbohydrates, you're eating a regular diet, if you eat coconut oil, MCT oil specifically, you can buy it as MCT oil, that goes right into your liver. It doesn't need this enzyme. It just goes right into your liver, right into the mitochondria. It starts producing these ketones. They go to your brain and they give it energy. As we get older, our brain doesn't use glucose as well. And so our brain starts functioning poorer. If you eat ketones, coconut oil, especially if you eat medium chain triglycerides, you can buy just MCT oil. It will boost ketones in your body and it boosts brain function. So that's what I had ended with on this. And we can talk more about that later and even bring the slide up. But weight management, it just makes sense. All these studies show that if you fast, you end up losing weight. So it's great for weight loss. For diabetes, once again, this is comparing 2 large meals to 6 small meals. I picked that for a purpose here in just a second. So this is looking at weight. If you eat 6 meals a day and you're on a diet, they lost 2 pounds. If you cut it down to 2 meals a day, that's intermittent fasting. If you eat lunch and dinner, and that's it. So I don't eat before noon. I don't eat after 6. That's called time-restricted fasting. Some people call it intermittent fasting. This study shows you exactly what happens when you do that. Cut the amount of hours you eat down to 8, or 10, 8, or even 6. I cut it down to 6. I eat between noon and 6. And when you have 2 meals a day, people lost weight compared to 6 meals a day, cut it down to 2 meals a day. That improved in fasting, plasma glucose improved, C-peptide. This is an inflammatory factor. Inflammation is a cause of arthritis, and it's part of a multiple cause for almost every degenerative disease. Look at this. When you eat 6 meals a day, it went down a little bit. When you diet on 6 meals a day, if you diet on 2 meals a day, it drops drastically. So the inflammation in your body, if you have trouble with arthritis or other inflammatory diseases, this works amazingly well. This is glucagon. So insulin's here, glucagon balances it out. When you have fasting glucagon, this shows that compared to 6 meals a day, it went up. Glucagon dropped drastically. And this is hemoglobin A1C, a long-term marker of glucose. It dropped more with 2. This is the best study I've seen to show 2 meals a day eating when you're trying to diet is better than eating all day long. And I just read a study yesterday, well, I'll get to that right here, on cancer. This is just talking about calorie restriction in cancer. Look at this, restrict your calories. Every single study here. Here's the line that shows there's no difference. Here's one study that showed that it was bad to restrict your diet. All these other 20 studies shows it's beneficial. I read a study where they just took people that were in the ICU, and they were really, really terminal. And instead of giving them the tube feeding 24 hours, they cut it to 12. They gave 12 hours, and they fasted them for 12, gave it 12 more hours. They improved dramatically just because they gave them a break of food, and they didn't just keep it coming in all the time. If you think about it, that's the way our bodies were made, so that we don't eat all the time. Sometimes there's famine. Sometimes there's seasonal things where we have more or less. And so God made our bodies to handle that really well. And if we eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, evening snack all day, and we do that all the time, our body never gets time to rest and to clean house. So our conclusion for today is eat mainly plants. The Bible agrees with scientists. They all agree. Eat plants. Choose foods as closely as possible to the way God made them. Less refined, better, almost always. Not always, but almost always. Science supports portion control. You can do that by just changing your dining environment, but you can really do it by fasting. And many spiritual benefits to fasting. But science has come along now and shown, wow, there's just amazing things. I mean, I've had issues with like arthritis in this knuckle, like when I was 25, and I started taking fish oil, and it would go away for decades at a time. And then I noticed that it started coming back, and I started shrinking the amount of time that I ate, giving my body time to clean house. I don't have this in here, but it's called autophagy, autophagy. Our body eats itself. It cleans up those bad things. As we metabolize proteins, fats, carbohydrates, nucleic acids, little pieces of them end up all over our cell. There's just junk in there. And as we stop eating for a period of time, after 12 hours, it takes about 12 hours to kick in. So if you stop at 6 at night, by 6 in the morning, you fasted. If you fast those other 6 hours, autophagy starts, and your body starts collecting the junk that's in your cells and digesting it, turning it back into food, nutrients we can use. It breaks open and gives our body more nutrients. So autophagy is amazing what it does when we fast. Okay.